Mutant Chronicles, Fiction, The Apostle of Insanity Trilogy, Volume 3, Dementia, by Michael A. Stackpole. Chapter 20. I managed to convince Ms. Wickersham that she didn't need to physically help me dress by allowing her to select what I would be wearing that day. While she sorted through the clothes hanging in my closet, I pulled on ballistic nylon torso armor and tightened the straps to hold it in place. Over that, I donned the white shirt and olive three-piece suit she picked out for me. I put a narrow knot on the tie, then buttoned down the shirt's collar. The only foot gear I had were boots, and they were equipped with lifts. The right also had a knife sheath built in, and I transferred the thin blade from a heavier pair of boots to the one I was wearing. Though Ms. Wickersham and I both searched the apartment for it, I found no shoulder holster for the Punisher. So I put the pistol in a briefcase and we headed out. After crowding into the lunar track train in Orontius, we got off again at Thebit so Ms. Wickersham could go to her apartment and change into her more suitable office attire. Her apartment was not much bigger than mine, but it had more by way of decorations. Small frame display cases were filled with metal and porcelain thimbles. The collection boasted a few thimbles made before Earth was abandoned, but many more that were issued on momentous occasions here on Luna, like the installation of Cardinal Ian Duran as the head of the Brotherhood, or Charles Colding's election as president of Capital half a dozen years back. Her collection appeared to be an outgrowth of her passion for embroidery. I know it seems impossible to imagine the term passion having anything to do with a vac, but it seemed appropriate in this case. Exquisitely detailed embroidery decorated the wall hangings, table runners, and pillows throughout the apartment. Well, it did strike me that a vac's ability to pay specific attention to tasks that others would see as mindlessly boring would make doing a repetitive task like embroidery possible. The decision to actually do it, and the choices involving patterns and color schemes, hinted at some creativity. It might be that the Mark I drug did not rob vacs of their creativity and emotion, just suppressed it and forced it to come out in other ways. I found myself hoping that my observation reflected the truth, because in it I found reason to dispute what the Brotherhood found so pernicious about Cybertronic. How could the dehumanizing of employees not seem evil to the Brotherhood? If vacs could display creativity, it meant their humanity was not stolen, but just deferred. And somehow that difference was very important to me at the moment. Ms. Wickersham returned dressed in a khaki jacket and a skirt combination over a white blouse. "I apologize for any delay, Mr. Dent." "I did not notice any delay, Ms. Wickersham." I pointed to one of the pillows that had Capital's striking eagle crest stitched into it. "Your handiwork is very good." She watched me for a moment, a vacuity behind her flawless blue eyes. Then she nodded. "Thank you. I set a quota for myself each month. I give them to friends." "Your friends are quite lucky." "Friends are important." I smiled politely at her. "They are important, and I'm glad to have you as a friend." A stiffness entered her posture as she looked at me. "Do you consider me a friend?" "Yes." "Then why do you denigrate my intelligence, Mr. Dent?" I blinked my eyes. "I'm not sure I understand what you mean." "You engage in verbal communication that reveals an underestimation of my value as an individual. Friends do not treat friends with such a lack of respect." Flashes of Rex's nearly constant flirtations with Ms. Wickersham vibrated through my brain, like the sound of fingernails being raked across slate. I apologize for my conduct. I know it was inappropriate, but at the time I was incapable of operating correctly. That's not an excuse, just an explanation. "Accepted. She preceded me to the door, and I fought to refrain from watching her walk. "We should be going." We returned to the train station and took the North Line to the center of Lunacy. The walk from the central station to Cybertronic headquarters was not too far, and we entered the building through the main entrance. A knot of Brotherhood novices at the base of the steps did make me uneasy, but I got past them by affecting Mrs. Wickersham's indifference to them. I left her at her desk, which I noticed consciously for the first time had embroidered covers for her computer console and chair. She buzzed me into the Ard land of Oz, and a small winged construct swooped down and flew a circle around me. It looped me again, darting in at my face before flapping its way back out to a more elliptical orbit. Two men in white frocks cheered. "It works, Rex. It knows you have a gun and wants to disarm you." Really? I set my briefcase on the edge of a partition and popped it open. The little bat creature sped up and made a fast circuit, then dove in at the Punisher in my briefcase. Like a vampire falling on the neck of a victim, it dropped onto the pistol's heavy barrel and clamped its teeth into the metal. Its wings unfurled and it began to drag the gun away. I closed the briefcase. Boris the Bat beat his wings frantically against the inside of the case. I snapped the lock shut, then handed the case to Simmons. "Be careful, the gun is loaded." The slender scientist crushed. I shook my head and walked back to Dr. Carter's office. I knocked once, then waited to be invited in. Dr. Carter looked up from her desk. "Oh, it's you, Rex." She held her right hand up, then looked strangely at me. "No nick sticks." "They're bad for you, Doctor." Her hand came down as she slowly stood and stared hard at me. "Is that you, Rex?" I nodded. "It's me, more or less." She frowned. "Can you explain that?" "I don't know. Given what I have to explain, perhaps we can come to an understanding if you can answer some questions for me." "I'll try." "I take it by your reaction just now. You were unaware of anything unusual happening to me recently." I smiled. And yes, I realize that this is an odd question to ask of the person who brought me back to life. Did something else happen, aside from the seizure the day Beach took me to your apartment? "Probably. So you've had no contact with me since telling me I needed sleep?" Dr. Carter shook her head. "I reviewed diagnostics on your cybernetic components early yesterday. Nothing odd there." "You didn't examine me yourself?" "No, the data was sent to me through the mainframe. I was told they had sent Ms. Wickersham over to take the readings. You were resting after an operation on Saturday." My eyes narrowed as I looked at her desk. "Do you still have the data? Does it include an electroencephalogram?" Dr. Carter returned to her chair and swiveled around to her terminal. "I think it's still here." She hit some keys, then nodded. "It's here. You can go subreal and find specific information you want more quickly." I held my hands up. "Not just yet. Can you check that EEG against my old EEG records and see if you get an exact match?" "Rex, no two EEGs are going to match exactly." "Humor me." Andrea Carter was nothing if not good. She looked at the pattern displayed on the screen and hit keys in rapid succession. "Looks like a sleeping EEG. That cuts down the search. Let me see here." It took her 5 minutes, then her terminal beeped and she smiled up at me. "Not a perfect match, but close enough. Someone has been doctoring my data. The EEG on the diagnostic I saw from the day before yesterday was about 2 months old." She set her keyboard down on her desk. "So what happened to you?" "I don't exactly know." I walked over to the link couch and sat down. "I imagine, though, Carl has a good idea. After I speak with him, I'm going to talk to you again and explain as much as I can." Smiling at her, I lay back and went subreal. Before my death, I had never gone subreal. Capital shared all the other corporations' paranoia about computers and the things the Dark Legion could do to them. though I knew of people who interface through networks, like those the whiz kid used so effectively. Exploring computer networks wasn't something Archie's sons would do. Computers were unreliable and risky, and my father's skill at avoiding unnecessary risk passed full on to his sons. I materialized in the room that Carl and I used for our conversations, but I did not lie down on the couch. When Carl appeared, I made my onboard computer resolve him into a clear image of another human being. Then I offered him my hand. "Thank you for seeing me, Carl, without notice." "My pleasure." He shook my hand, then stepped back. "You are RKX571127. "I am, but not quite the same one you knew before that weekend." Carl nodded solemnly. "I gathered that from your willingness to see me as something more than a cartoon construct." The old Rex knew deep down that he was not a fully rounded individual. He feared that integration with me would result in his death, and he was determined that he would not die again. To reassure him that he was complete, he viewed you as less so within this forum. Only by making his judge less real than he was could he continue to believe he was whole. Carl arched an eyebrow at me. "Fascinating." He gestured at the couch, and it metamorphosed into a chair similar to his with a table set between us. The room surrounding us dissolved into a mountaintop patio, looking out over the arid red vista of Mars. "I hope you don't mind a change of scenery." "Not at all." I looked around, then smiled. "Mare Cimmerium, isn't it?" "I didn't know you had been to Mars." I shook my head. Never been there, but once I had to make someone believe I had. "I see. Yes, this is Mars. I have an old image running here. Recent constructions have marred the vista." "The Brotherhood's chapel of eternal vigilance?" "You do your homework." "Better safe than sorry." "I never heard Rex say that before." Carl sat, and I joined him. "What shall I call you?" "Rex still works, though I prefer the original connotation of the name over the homophonous one." "And I applaud that change in attitude." Carl thought for a moment, then frowned. "You are suggesting, are you not, that before integration with Rex was, in essence, insane?" "Possibly, but I was certainly functional. I think the closest explanation comes from the realm of multi-personality disorders, in which a traumatic event causes the birth of a personality to accept the stresses of that situation." Carl smiled. "Dying would certainly qualify as a traumatic event." It was. Rex cobbled together a lot of my aggression and anger and molded it into a personality. One of the reasons I had trouble asserting myself to force integration was because I was no longer aggressive. Rex's lack of depth is obvious when one looks at his inability to deal with women as anything more than sexual objects. "An interesting analysis, Rex." "An understanding of human psychology is important in preparing for deep cover work." "I'm interested, though. Why are you trying to analyze Rex and determine if he was sane or not?" Carl opened his hands, and in the left one appeared a cut crystal goblet filled with a burgundy whose flowery bouquet I could easily pick out of the dry Martian air. You, has or had an affinity for a Dark Legion apostle named Muwaji. He is also known as the Demon of Screaming Insanity. My operation thesis has been that Rex's connection in the fugue state has come through his insanity. I smiled and found a glass of the same vintage sitting on a table in front of me. "You have been unable to reconcile the fact that all insane people are not undergoing the same fugue states with your theory, correct?" "Even our attempt to provide the insane with the same mechanical aids you have, while alleviating their symptoms, have not resulted in successful duplication of the fugue links." "That's because there's no significant correlation between Rex's insanity and the fugue states. It's something much more simple, yet far more strange." I lifted up my glass and drank some of the wine. It cut the dust in my throat, and its stout flavor made me smile. Had I known the pleasures of subjective reality, I might have come over to Cybertronic on my own. The simulation is close, but the real thing is better. Carl set the goblet down and folded his arms together. What was the link? When I died, Dr. Carter took bone fragments and brain tissue from me, as well as removing bone from my long bones and the remains of L1. You combined those bits of bone with ashes of another body and returned them to my family. We did that in case there was ever a time Capital decided to check your remains for DNA to confirm your death. So I understand. What you did not know, and what Capital does not know, is that my ashes were stolen before they were sealed into the ash casket. One of Ragathal's minions took them on orders from his master. I held my hands up, from trace impressions that Rex missed during the fugues. I know they were not looking for my ashes, but the remains of someone, anyone. I sat back and watched the inverted Martian sunset through the stem of my goblet. The ashes and bones were combined with a mortar to create a life-size statue of Muad'Dib in Ragathal's Holy of Holies. The statue itself serves as a communication device between Ragathal and the Lord of Visions. Yet because my bones are part of it, the energy expended is muted and changed to avoid detection by other apostles. You form a cutout, facilitating communication without realizing that it is taking place. I believe I did, yes. Since I was supposed to be dead, the conversations could not be overheard. As Ragathal is in service to Algaroth, his dealings with Muad'Dib would doom him, and seen from Muad'Dib's point of view, Ragathal's failure can embarrass Algaroth as easily as his success can empower Muad'Dib. Muad'Dib is in a no-lose situation as regards Ragathal. I don't know that is entirely true. I believe Lorraine Coven's very existence could compromise Ragathal, and through him, hurt Muad'Dib. Carl nodded, then sipped some of his wine. I feel sorry for the woman, caught in the middle as she is. My mind flashed back to something Carl had said earlier. Do you think Cybertronic implants could unlock Lorraine's mind? Could Dr. Carter help her? Treatment showed great promise with catatonic patients. Good. Then will you take care of her? I know she'll be a wonderful asset to Cybertronic. I believe you. You have shown excellent judgment in the past, incomplete though you were. Carl shrugged. If it were in my power, I would help her. I frowned. But I can't help her. Why not? Because as of 8 hours ago, we turned her over to Capital, and right now I have no idea where they put her.
Mutant Chronicles, Fiction, The Apostle of Insanity Trilogy, Volume 3, Dementia, by Michael A. Stackpole. Chapter 20, End.